This morning we're interviewing Mr. George W. Shaad, Michael Akey, the interviewer, at Camp Smith on 2/14/2001. Mr. Shaad, what were you doing prior to the war?
I was a student in Rensselaer.
Okay, RPI?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in my sophomore year when I enlisted and my junior year when I went in. I was in the reserve in between.
Okay. What motivated you to enlist?
They had a recruiting board came on the campus and they said the government, the war effort needed engineers and we should all enlist. And about half of the class went in the Army and about half of the class went in the Navy or Marines.
So pretty much everybody went?
Most of the guys, yeah.
Okay.
The Navy guys stayed in school in the ROTC or V-12 or some other program.
Okay, this was about 1940...
42.
42.
Fall of 42.
Fall of 42. Where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
In Troy.
In Troy. Well, what was the general reaction to that?
Well, we had just had a fraternity banquet. It was Founders Day banquet, Sunday evening, and after we got home, somebody said they bombed Pearl Harbor. And of course, we'd had drinks at dinner, and that kind of sobered us up in a hurry.
Sure. Okay. After, now, you went to basic where?
In Camp Fan in Tyler, Texas.
Okay. What was that like?
It was Branch and Material Replacement Training Center, and it was 17 weeks. We was in Texas, and brand new camp. We planted grass in the camp on our hands and knees with bayonets, blade at a time.
So, what did you think of basic training?
After basic, we went to, we had interviews for what's called a star board, and we went to, back to college to study engineering, and went to Virginia Tech.
What was that like?
It was an engineering school, but it was a military school. There were 2,000 GIs and 2,000 in the town, and we had formations in the morning and the evening, retreat parade, and in our rooms at 8 o'clock and lights out at 10 every day.
What was the training like for an engineer?
Well, we had regular classes, regular college classes, calculus and strength materials, and engineering courses, surveying.
And after that coursework, what was next?
After that, we went back to the infantry. I went to the 84th Infantry Division, and I got assigned to a rifle company in company headquarters platoon. I was a commanding officer's runner, radio operator, bodyguard.
You weren't assigned to an engineer unit?
No way.
Did you expect to be assigned to an engineer unit?
I enlisted to be an engineer in the Army.
But due to the Army's...
in the initial interview, the interviewer put down that I was a student with no experience.
Okay. So you remember the 84th Infantry. What, were you in a regiment at that point?
Yeah.
What regiment was it?
The 334th.
334th. Okay. And this was at Camp?
Camp Fan, no, Camp Claiborne in Louisiana.
In Louisiana.
Just outside Alexandria, Louisiana.
Okay. And what were you doing? What did you do down there?
Well, it was, we got assimilated into an outfit that had all the ratings taken by the previous people in the unit. We filled up all the privates and PFCs and took all the KP and guard duty.
What did you think of that?
Not much.
No.
I was lucky being in company headquarters, being a CO's runner and radio operator, but other than being in company headquarters, it was just more infantry.
How long did you train in Louisiana?
Well, we went down there, I guess in the spring of '44, and we trained down there until September when we left for overseas.
What, did you have any idea of where you were going to be going?
No, except we left from Camp Kilmer, and we went to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and sailed out of there.
Okay. You remember what ship you were on?
It was a Victory ship. No, excuse me, going over was the Thomas N. Barry. It was a converted Caribbean cruiser. They had a swimming pool in the after deck that was decked over.
What was the trip over like?
Trip over wasn't bad. It was we were in the fifth hole in the F deck, so we were a couple decks below sea level and stuffy. We went up and slept on the deck at night.
Get much exercise?
No. About the only thing you could do on the boat, it took about an hour to line up for meals. And lunch was only soup and crackers.
How was the food?
Institutional food, GI food.
Was any training on board? Did you continue the training?
No, I got put on a detail as a storekeeper's helper, and that helped because you got to eat with the crew, and you got 3 meals a day and fresh food. And,
So
but no training.
You found out the Navy ate a little better.
It was, I think, Merchant Marine. I don't think it was Navy.
And where did you arrive at the end of the trip?
We arrived in Southampton, and we went to Devonshire, I guess, possibly Hampshire, but near Winchester in England, and we stayed there about a month. And we left on Halloween to go across the channel.
So you arrived in France. Was there any training while you were in England?
We did have some, but it was a mixed up affair. We were getting problems in relieving the company at night, and night problems. But when the commanding general found out we were being trained there, he said, "Well, you're only supposed to work the kinks out after the trip over." And training stopped.
Okay, so you went to France in October?
Halloween we crossed the channel.
Okay.
So beginning of November.
Beginning of November. Where did you arrive?
Omaha Beach.
Omaha. What was it like arriving?
Omaha Beach at that time was pretty well organized and settled, and there were troops on the banks clearing up the mess and working in their undershirts and cutting trees and clearing the property and stuff, and jeering at us as we were marching by, loaded down like pack horses.
Did you have any idea of where you were going to be going?
Only that it was ETO. We went by convoy up through Paris and into Belgium and then Holland. We ended up in Holland and jumped off from Holland.
So you were part of the First Army?
British Second. We were attached to the British Second Army.
Oh, you're British Second Army?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were the infantry and they had the tanks.
What was that like?
It was mid-November, so it was cold and wet and muddy.
How was it being attached to the British?
Well, when you went through the chow line, you got rum in your rations. You got a canteen cup and a mess kit, and you go through and you get a shot of rum first, and then you get your tomato soup or coffee or whatever.
What did you think of that? What did you think of that? It was a different experience?
It was totally different, yeah.
Did you have much interaction with British soldiers?
No. I was fortunate in the assignment I had, but the troops who were on foot and following the tanks hated them because the tanks would get bogged down in the mud, and they'd draw fire, and the guys would get the fire.
You were with the headquarters company?
I was with the headquarters platoon, but at that time I was in the mine clearing platoon.
Okay.
I was attached to Regiment and separated from my rifle company.
All right. Were you given any training?
I was trained for the mine clearing. We had 2 weeks of special training in England by Canadian Rangers, fellows who had fought in Italy and Africa and who knew the German mines and were able to train us.
What kind of mines were you going to be dealing with?
Anti-personnel and anti-vehicle mines.
Like the S mine? And
S-mine, the box mine, the shoe mine, and ones of that type.
How was the training?
We had lectures and we had field experience, and there were 3 regiments being trained at the same time, and the 2 regiments would be out getting a class or something. One would be back booby-trapping your barracks.
What was that like?
Well, you never knew when you went back to your barracks what was going to happen. The stove might pop, or you sit on your bunk and that would pop, or you pick up your rifle and something else would go.
So that was
only the caps, of course, and no real charges, but enough to make you alert.
That was all part of the training?
Yeah.
Do you think that the training you got served you well when it came to practical experience?
It got me back home.
Well, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were picked to be in this mine clearing unit?
Well, possibly because I had the engineering background. I had asked my CO one time if I could transfer to an engineer outfit. He said, no way.
They needed bodies.
Well, I was his runner, and I think he expected that I get the training and come back to the company and do the work for him. But instead, they made up a platoon of 50 of us that were from all the companies, and we served the regimental sector and not just the company sector.
Okay. So you were, so you were in Belgium at that point, in November?
In November, we were in Germany. When the Battle of the Bulge started, then we went down to Belgium.
Okay.
That was mid-December.
So you were in the northern sector with Montgomery.
We were the furthest north and also the furthest into Germany when the Bulge started.
Okay. And who was the division commander at that point?
Alex Bowling.
What was he like?
He was great. He was a good man.
What did you think of your officers in general?
Our company commander that I had in the States was like a scrambling quarterback. He was all over the place. And, he got wounded first in each of the first 2 attacks. He got bandaged up and came back and led the second attack. And I met him after 2 weeks. I met him a little after Thanksgiving. And he said the company went from 188 down to 47 in the 2 weeks. There was 1 platoon captured, there were guys who were killed, and there were guys wounded. And a lot of the fellows had trench feet from they called it immersion. They said there was no longer trench feet, it was called immersion feet.
So, when did you hear about the Bulge?
I guess about December 19th or 20th, something like that. We drove from Germany down to Belgium in the back of 6x6s, and it was snowing on the way, and it took us 20 hours to drive down.
Did you have an idea of where you were going?
No idea. We got dumped in a little town in the middle of the night, and just told to go in this building and get a place to sleep, roll out your sleeping bags. And the next day we still didn't know, and then they finally told us what was going on. They wouldn't let us read the papers, they wouldn't tell us any news because it was so hectic. But on the way down, our convoy went down with cat's eyes on the trucks.
Explain what they are.
They're lights about half an inch long and maybe a quarter of an inch high in the headlights. And slow speed, we passed the British troops with campfires and flashlights, and their helmets hung over their shoulders making tea.
British have to have their tea.
Yeah.
So you're down into Belgium at this point. You were there about 2 days before you
No, about one day.
About one day?
About one day.
And then what happened?
Well, that day, we went Christmas shopping because we thought we were on an R&R trip going back down there. Nobody told us what to do. We stayed overnight in a convent school, slept in the hallway on the floor. The girls were home and the nuns were in the basement.
What was that like?
Well, it was like a private school, a Catholic school, and we found out later that the gymnasium was like a hospital for the wounded Belgian Maquis that were in the area. And walking around town when we went Christmas shopping, I met some of these Belgian boys who were in civilian clothes walking through town, and they just said that they didn't want to get caught in the bed in the hospital, so during the day they sent them out in the town. The Germans, and we didn't know it, the Germans were just outside the town.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the stores were busy putting boards over the windows and closing up and getting ready to go.
They weren't sure what was going to happen, were they?
No.
Been through this before. What happened the next day?
Well, the next day we started to get assignments as to what we were going to do. We got to talk to some of the other guys that we couldn't see at night when we pulled in, guys from other units, and the headquarters was in that town. And I got assigned out to a village where they had some casualties. 6 of us from our platoon weren't clearing mines at that time, so we were used as replacements. And we went out to this village to fill in the gaps of where the guys got hit.
So you got assigned to a different regiment?
No, it was the same regiment, just different platoon and part of our own company.
Oh.
At that time we were attached to an anti-tank company.
Did you have any training in that?
No, but I had been a radio operator, and they said, oh, okay, you operate the radio when somebody else does. Somebody else was a machine gunner and he got put on a machine gun.
So what happened? What happened next? Your first combat experience was when?
First combat was in November, back in Germany.
What was it?
The first night before they jumped off, we were out clearing mines.
Okay.
Had no idea where we were. Somebody just led us by the hand out through an orchard and said, here, this is the area we want cleared.
Well, explain what you would do when you arrived in an area that you believe was mined. What were the procedures?
Well, I was a mine detector operator. We had squads of 12, and our platoon was 50. Included the sergeants and the lieutenant and all. And we'd get into this area and we'd just sweep it with mines. We'd line up and sweep with mine detectors. And then my function was to operate the mine detector, and when I found something that responded to the amplifier we had on our shoulder, then we had markers that we put down on it. The rest of the squad coming behind would have to investigate it and find out what it was and remove it if it would.
So you were basically in the lead.
Yeah.
Was the equipment pretty good?
Yeah, it was, I guess, like radar or sonar. It emitted a beam that would bounce off anything metallic. The problem was that there was so much shrapnel and scrap around, even in an orchard, that it was hard to detect exactly what it was. But
with experience, were you better able to detect?
Yeah, we didn't have too much experience, that being our first session.
You successfully cleared the...
Well, the attack went through that orchard the next day. And when we found out where we were, of course, when we got back to the quarters, we started shaking. But at that time, we didn't have any idea.
Kept you in the dark on that one.
Yeah. When we got back, we figured out that, we were up in front of the lines.
When a mine clearing unit was out in front of the lines, did you have any riflemen to support, or
just our own squad?
Just
we carried rifles, and our own squad would have riflemen. Each guy had a different function to take care of.
Okay. Getting back to Belgium, When did you realize that this was a major German attack?
Well, our orders in Belgium were to hold at all costs. We were at the deepest penetration of it and told to stop it. And that was our division's function.
What geographic areas were you near? Any villages?
Well, the town that we went into was Marseille, and that's was further west from Bastogne and that area.
So you were on the northern shoulder of the Bulge?
The western shoulder.
Western shoulder. Okay.
When we changed from defensive to offensive, we went into the northern shoulder, and our division went down to meet up with Patton coming up from the south.
So what was the weather like?
Snow and cold. It looked just like Christmas cards. Snow all over the place and evergreens and all covered with snow.
How was it being an infantryman in that kind of weather?
Brutal. I was fortunate, as I say. I was in a platoon that went off and did the job and went back and went into decent quarters. But the guys in the foxholes were sleeping out in it at troubles.
Illness on the rise? And
frostbite and we had OD uniforms and no camouflage in the snow.
Did you have winter clothing?
Just army overcoats.
What about footwear?
Footwear is just army boots. Some guys had galoshes, but you were lucky if you could catch up with them. I found mine in the aid station. Somebody else was on a litter and didn't need the boots, and they were standing there, and I stepped in them.
So the troops really weren't prepared for the weather.
We trained in Louisiana for jungle warfare.
That'll do it. So how long were you involved in the Bulge Offensive?
Up until January 14th when I got wounded.
Okay. Tell us about that day.
Well, it was a beautiful day. I was coming down the road, snow on both sides of the road and pine trees all around, nothing but pine trees in there. And a shell came in and hit one of the pine trees, and I stopped it with my leg.
And what happened at that point?
Well, at that time, it was Sunday about time for lunch, and the Jeep had just come up to bring us back to relieve us. And I got in the Jeep and rode back to the aid station. And from then on, I was littered into a hospital.
So what was the first thing that went through your mind when you got hit?
The first thing was I didn't know whether one of the guys who was with me had accidentally hit me with something. It was like a baseball bat hit me in the leg. And none of them did, and then I looked down and I figured, well, no, it's not them, it's me. And I was standing, and I was able to stand, and I walked a little bit, so I figured it wasn't all that bad. But when I got in the aid station, he put me right on a litter and said, "You stay here."
And where did they take you from the aid station?
Back to Liège and into Paris.
What was that like, that trip like?
Well, back to Liège was in an ambulance with 4 of us in the ambulance, and then from Liège to Paris was on a train, and from Paris to, I don't know, I guess Le Havre was also on a train, and then a ship to England. And
what was your initial care like at the aid station?
well, just I guess maybe penicillin and sulfur and a bandage.
Well treated? You felt you were well treated?
Oh yeah, no question they're well treated.
What did you think about the possibility of this wound taking you out of combat?
I had no idea how severe it was or how long I'd be out, but you find out later after pieces out of you and you start recovering. But while I was in Liège, I wrote a postcard to my mother, and I told her, by this time maybe the Army's told you that I've been wounded in action, but I'm still in one piece, don't worry about it. And I had the shrapnel in my leg until I got back to Paris, and I guess maybe 2 weeks later, but you keep getting penicillin and sulfatriazole every 4 hours up until they get rid of it, and then after that until you heal. But if your wound is supposed to take more than 120 days to recover, you're supposed to go back to the States. And they kept me in England and gave me rehabilitation training, convalescent training, and I was on the boat going back the second time when the war in Europe ended.
When did your mother get the postcard? Was it fairly...
It was a long time before the Army sent the notice.
Really?
Yeah.
So she first heard about it from you?
Yeah, yeah.
Which may have been a good thing.
Yeah, it undoubtedly was. Because the New York Times, I saw articles that she had saved about what we were doing, and that told more than what we knew.
So you were on, when you heard about VE Day, you were where?
I was on the channel going back the second time. They waited till we got on the boat and told us that all the war's over.
What went through your mind at that point?
Well, that was great. When I got back to my outfit, it took 10 days to go from France to northern Germany where the outfit was. My outfit had met the Russians on the Elbe River, and they had gone up to meet the Russians and then come back, and they were in Hanover. And it took 10 days to go across in boxcars to get up there.
What was that trip like?
Well, I learned to play bridge. There was nothing to do but sit on a duffel bag and sleep and eat and play bridge.
So were you pleased to see your fellows, your combat fellows?
There were 8 fellows left out of the original 188 that I knew when I got back there.
8?
8. And the captain was different, the non-coms were different. They didn't know me and I didn't know them.
So you stayed, the unit stayed in, you were in what, Germany at that point?
Yeah. We had occupation duty in various places.
Okay. What was occupation duty like?
Like guard duty, we guarded displaced person camps. We guarded, I guess, anything that the government wanted guarded. There were factories and mines and different things along. One place we guarded was a winery, wine cellar, and nobody was allowed in unless he was in uniform.
Did you have much dealings with the German civilians?
I did towards the end. I studied German in high school, and I had a couple of years. It took a lot of listening to it and reading it to bring it back. And when we had occupation duty, each company has whoever can speak or make themselves known in German is the interpreter. It's not an official Army title, but it was what we did. And the fellow who had been our company interpreter was older than I, and he was going home, and the lieutenant heard me speak to one of the women who worked in our mess hall, and he said, "Shaad, you're the interpreter." And it wasn't a job that was respected or liked by the guys because the interpreter was always doing things for the officers, and we weren't allowed to talk to Germans.
Oh, really?
We had that non-fraternization.
So, what did the soldiers think of the non-fraternization policy?
Not much.
Really? Why is that?
I don't know. The policy came down from on high, and we got turned in one time for fraternizing when we were playing softball on the field, and the girls were on the second floor of a house talking to us out the window. We were waiting to turn the bat, and the lieutenant turned us in for fraternizing.
And what was the punishment for that?
Oh, company punishment, KP here. But no, I guess that time the charge went up to battalion, and at that time my old CO was battalion officer, and he just tore it up.
Nice.
But I became company interpreter at any rate, and then the lieutenant told me I could make it whatever I wanted, so it worked out all right.
What was your impression of the Germans?
About the only Germans we had to talk to were women who came in and trying to get someplace or get something. Some of them just wanted to meet Americans, but some of them had problems that and our rifle company had nothing that we could help them with. We would just direct them to the right place to find out whatever information they wanted. But the ones I met spoke very good German, what's called High German, and they were educated, and they could also speak English, but they wouldn't because they're afraid speaking English that they're going to get graded in school or something, or corrected in some way, and they won't come out perfect. Their English was better than my German. But
what happened after occupation duty?
I got sent during occupation duty, I got sent to two schools, one in London and one in Biarritz, France. And the one in London was 2 months, and the one in Biarritz was supposed to be 2 months, and ended up as just 6 weeks.
Schools for what?
The school in London was architecture. And some of the fellows that may have wanted to go to school were afraid if they went to school they'd miss a chance to go home. And I knew I didn't have enough points to get home, so I applied for the one in London, and it was 2 months, and you had to have 2 years of architecture or engineering in order to qualify for it. And I had that, so I got sent, and it turned out to be a good school. It was a school that was the Architectural Association School of Architecture, and it was all lectures and board work and field trips, no books. We had problems at doing a drafting board, but no books. And we had Army mail call, we had tea time for the British, and then we had lunch, and then we had afternoon tea time, and 4 o'clock or so we were through, and we were right in London with quarters and rations.
So when did you hear that you'd be going home?
I heard from that when I was going to school down in southern France at Biarritz, and down there I had 2 courses, one in structures and one in freehand drawing. And aside from going to classes there was nothing to do but have fun. But word came through from the Alpha in Germany down to the school in France about going home. And it had 3 different categories, and I was in the middle one. Some fellows didn't have many points and they were supposed to get reassigned for occupation duty. Some were supposed to complete the course, and some were supposed to go home immediately. Well, by the time the German operators sent it to the French operators, it suffered in translation. And I got word to return to the outfit to go home with them. And I got back to the outfit and they said, oh, these weren't the orders that we sent to you. Go back to school. So I went back to school, and the school said, oh, you're checked out, you can't come back to school. So it turned out I had to go home on my own. There were 6 of us, I guess, that were in that category. And we went home on our own, and we landed in the Brooklyn Navy Yard on the next ship that docked at the same dock as the outfit docked at. Their stickers were, the patches were all over the walls of the dock when we got there. And when I got to Camp Dix, they were all there waiting to go home. I went home with them anyhow.
So what was it like being back in the States?
It was a real thrill. I got back at the end of January in '46. And in February of '46, I was back in college.
So you went right back in?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
Rensselaer.
You came back up to RPI?
Yeah. So I had 2 years to finish up there. So I went back and I finished in January '48.
And what did you do after school?
After school, I was a civil engineer, and I worked. I was an assistant instructor for 1 semester, and then I went out to Detroit to work with a contractor. Then I worked with the city of Detroit in the city engineer's office, and then came back to New York.
And you spent most of your career as an engineer?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I have about 25 years with consulting engineering firms and about 25 years with government.
What's your general impression of your military experience?
Oh, I think it was great. I think it benefited me. I resent that I didn't get into engineering work, but I think it was a sales pitch to get us to the list, but somebody had more votes than people back in engineers, and they needed an infantryman, and we lost classmates and fraternity brothers. My roommate died in Normandy, and one of my classmates died there.
So it was, you believe it was a worthwhile experience for you?
Definitely. Definitely.
Any general comments you might have?
Well, when I got to Camp Dix and I was on my way out, they asked me if I wanted to get in the reserve again. I said, I've been that route once. No more.
You paid your dues then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.